Discover the golden age of China, the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty, also known as the Tang Empire, was an imperial dynasty within ancient China that ruled from 618 through to 907, with a brief period of interruption from 690 until 705. The Tang took over from the Sui dynasty and was followed by the warfare of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. The Tang dynasty is regarded by several historians as being the high point in Chinese civilization, as well as being the golden age of cosmopolitan culture. The dynasty was founded by the Li family clan after a period of decline during the final years of the Sui dynasty, which saw a period of progress and stability during the early years of Tang rule. The dynasty was briefly interrupted from 690 until 705, when Empress Wu Zetian seized the throne and claimed herself ruler of the Wu Zhou dynasty, and in doing so became the only legitimate Chinese empress regnant. Now this was a word I had not used before. For those of you, like me, that haven't come across this word before, it means reigning or ruling, such as the queen regnant, that is exercising authority, rule or influence. Some people might question the above and ask, what about Empress Dowager Cixi? The key word here being legitimate. Cixi was effectively in control for a number of years, but always under the pretext of one of her sons or guardians' emperorship. An Lushan Rebellion of 755 until 763 shook the nation and led to a devastating decline in central authority during the latter half of the dynasty. Just as the Sui had done before them, the Tang maintained a civil service system by recruiting scholar officials through recommendations and standardized examinations. The rise of regional military governors during the 9th century, in a practice known as jiadusha, undermined the civil order, with the dynasty and eventually the central government going into decline in the late 9th century. Agrarian rebellions resulted in a huge population loss, displacement of the people, widespread poverty, and further dysfunction of the government that brought an end to the dynasty in 907. The Tang capital, Chang'an. The Tang capital of Chang'an, present-day Xi'an, was the most populous city in the world for most of the Tang dynasty's existence. 2 censuses taken during the 7th and 8th centuries gave the empire an estimated population of around 50 million people, and that figure had risen to around 80 million people by the end of the Tang era. Professional and conscripted armies, consisting of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, were raised to contend with the rise in nomadic armies that jostled for control of Inner Asia and the lucrative trade routes along the Silk Road. Kingdoms far and wide paid tribute to the Tang imperial court, while the Tang controlled indirectly several regions through a protectorate system. Through their political hegemony, the Tang exerted considerable influence culturally over its East Asian neighbours of Japan and Korea. Flourishing Chinese culture. The Tang era is widely considered to be one of the greatest ages for Chinese poetry. 2 of China's greatest poets, Li Bai and Du Fu, lived during this time, contributing numerous cultural poems. Many famous painters also lived during the Tang dynasty, including Han Gan, Zhang Juan and Shou Fang, while Chinese court music was popularized by instruments such as the pipa. Scholars contributed a rich variety of historical literature, as well as producing encyclopedias and geographical works. Woodblock printing was developed, and Buddhism became a major influence within Chinese culture. However, in the mid-9th century, policies enacted by Emperor Wuzhong suppressed the following of Buddhism, and its influence went into decline. The history of the Tang dynasty. The Li family was of ethnic Han origin, while holding positions of important military aristocracy during the Sui dynasty. According to official Tang records, the family descended paternally from Baozi, the traditional founder of Taoism, Li Guang, the Han Dynasty general, and Li Gao, the founder of the Han-ruled Western Liang Kingdom. Known as the Longxi Li lineage, it included the prominent Tang poet Li Bai. However, some modern historians suggest the Tang imperial family may have concealed their Xianbei heritage. The Tang emperors had part Xianbei maternal ancestry from Emperor Guangzhou's mother, Duchess Dugu, who was undoubtedly part Xianbei. Li Yuan, who founded the Tang Dynasty, was the Duke of Tang and governor of Taiyuan, the capital of modern-day Shanxi, during the latter years of the Sui dynasty. He had prestige, military experience, and was a first cousin of Emperor Yang of Sui. In a 617 rebellion, Li Yuan, together with his son and an equally militant daughter, Princess Pingyang, who raised and commanded her own army, rose up and occupied Chang'an in the winter of 617. Emperor Yang was relegated to the position of Taizong Huang, or retired emperor. Li Yuan acted as regent to the puppet child emperor Yang Yo. On the 18th of June 618, Emperor Yang was murdered by General Yuan Huaji, with Li Yuan declaring himself the emperor of a new dynasty, the Tang. Taking on the imperial role of Emperor Guangzhou of Tang, Li Yuan ruled until 626 before he was forcibly removed by his son Li Shimin, the Prince of Qin. Li Shimin, Emperor Taizong. Li Shimin had been in command of armies since he turned 18 years of age and had particular skill with bow and arrow, sword and lance. He was also known for his effective cavalry charges. He defeated a numerically larger army controlled by Duojianda in 621 at Luoyang in the Battle of Hulao. Fear of his assassination led to his ambushing and killing two of his brothers, Li Yuanji and Crown Prince Li Jiancheng, in what became known as the Xiangwu Gate incident on July 2nd, 626. Shortly after this, his father abdicated in his favour, with Li Shimin ascending to the throne as Emperor Taizong. Although killing his two brothers, followed by deposing his father, was in contradiction of the Confucian value of filial piety, Taizong showed he was a more than capable leader as he listened to the advice of his wisest council members. In 628, Emperor Taizong organised a memorial service for the casualties of war, and in 629 he organised the building of Buddhist monasteries on the sites of major battles so that monks could pray for the fallen of both sides. Emperor Xuanzong's reign. There were many women prominent within the royal court, and in 706 Empress Wei, the wife of Emperor Xuanzong, persuaded her husband to staff government offices with his sister and her daughters, and further requested in 709 that he grant women the right to bequeath hereditary privileges to their sons. Until that time, it was exclusively a male right. Empress Wei eventually poisoned the emperor and placed his 15-year-old son on the throne in 710. 2 weeks after this event, Li Longji, later who became Emperor Xuanzong, entered the palace and had Empress Wei and her faction killed. Li Longji's father was instilled, and just as Emperor Xuanzong had been dominated by Empress Wei, so too was Ruzong by Princess Taiping. This infatuation ended in a failed coup by the princess in 712, and Ruzong abdicated in favour of his son, Emperor Xuanzong. Princess Taiping then chose to hang herself in 713. Emperor Xuanzong reigned for 44 years, a period in which the Tang Dynasty reached its peak in an era known as China's Golden Age, with low economic inflation and the imperial court having a toned down lifestyle. Xuanzong was seen as a progressive and benevolent ruler. He even abolished the death penalty in 747. Government ministries were staffed with people of different political factions to ensure equality. After 737, most of Xuanzong's political policies were conducted by Li Linfu, a long-standing chancellor who adopted a more aggressive foreign policy against non-Chinese generals. This policy ultimately led to the creation of conditions that caused a massive rebellion against Xuanzong. An Lushan Rebellion and Catastrophe. When the Tang Empire was at its height of power, which continued until the mid-8th century, the dynasty was rocked by the An Lushan Rebellion, which lasted from December 16, 755, and was not fully ended until February 17, 763. This revolt did much to destroy the prosperity of the Tang Empire. An Lushan was half Sogdian, half Turk, and being a Tang commander since 744, with experience in fighting the Khitans of Manchuria. He had been successful against them in 744, but most of his campaigns were unsuccessful. An Lushan was given great responsibility in Hebei. This responsibility enabled him to command an army of over 100,000 soldiers, which he used to hold a rebellion and captured the city of Luoyang, and named himself the emperor of a new but short-lived Yan state. The soldiers of the Tang army were no match for the experienced veterans An Lushan had recruited, so the royal court fled the capital Chang'an, with Xuanzong fleeing to Sichuan province. Armies were raised in Shanxi, and with the assistance of the Uyghur Khaganate, the fight was taken to oust the rebels. The Uyghur Khan Muyanshe led his people as they recaptured the Tang capital from the rebels, but they then refused to leave until they were paid an enormous sum of tribute of silk in return. The Tibetans took advantage of the political uncertainty and led raids on several areas of Chinese control, and even when the Tibetan Empire itself collapsed in 842, soon followed by the collapse of the Uyghurs, the Tang were in no position of power to retake control of Central Asia. An Lushan was killed by one of his eunuchs in 757. The rebellion continued under the control of Shi Shimin until he too was killed by his own son in 763. Jiadusha. One of the legacies left by the Tang government was the gradual rise of regional military governors that began in 710. Known as Jiadusha, it became the slow challenge of power against the central government. After the An Lushan Rebellion, the autonomous power and authority created by the Jiadusha in Hebei went way beyond the central government's control. A further series of rebellions between 781 and 784 in what are today the provinces of Hebei, Shandong, Hubei, and Henan led the government to acknowledge the Jiadusha's hereditary role without accreditation. While the Tang government relied on these governors and the armies they controlled for protection and to suppress any local uprisings, the central government in return had to allow these governors to maintain their armies, collect taxes, and even pass on their title to their heirs. As the decades passed, these military governors began phasing out the civil officials drafted by exams and became more autonomous from central authority. This practice continued until 960, when the Song Dynasty introduced a new civil order. With the central government collapsing in authority over the regions of the empire, bandits and river pirates began plundering settlements along the Yangtze River. In 858, massive floods along the Grand Canal meant loss of agricultural land across much of the North China Plain and the loss of tens of thousands of people through flooding and subsequent famine. These natural calamities led to the Chinese peasantry questioning the belief in the mandate of heaven, believing that the Tang had lost the right to rule. This belief was further tested when a disastrous harvest in 873 shook the very foundations of the empire with thousands more facing famine and starvation when less than half the available agriculture was gathered. In the early years of the dynasty, the central government was able to meet crises in harvest through a granary system of having surplus stocks to prevent famine, but this practice had been allowed to discontinue. The reign of Emperor Xuanzong, the early 9th century, was seen as a period of recovery for the Tang, this despite the stained reputation and effectiveness of the central government. The government, however, did take a step back from its role in managing the economy. This had the unintended effect of stimulating trade as more markets emerged with fewer bureaucratic restrictions. Emperor Xuanzong ruled from 805 until 820, and he was the last of the truly ambitious rulers of the Tang Dynasty. He ruled with an army of 240,000 strong, and between the years 806 and 819, Xuanzong's army quelled rebellious provinces on 7 occasions. Under his period of control, there was a brief end to the hereditary jiadushu, as the emperor appointed his own military officers to staff the regional offices and overcome bureaucracy at the regional level. However, Xuanzong's successors proved to be less than capable and showed more interest in the pursuits of hunting, feasting, and participating in outdoor sports than in effectively ruling the empire. Eunuchs were allowed to amass more power, and strife returned as the eunuchs clashed with scholar officials. The power of the eunuchs was mostly unchallenged after Emperor Wenzong's plot to have the eunuchs overthrown ended in failure. Instead, many of Wenzong's allies were publicly executed in Chang'an under the orders of senior eunuchs. The end of the dynasty. The Yuzhou Rebellion of 874 until 884 resulted in the cities of Chang'an and Luoyang being sacked. It took a decade to suppress this uprising. Yuzhou was a native Han who, through his revolt, permanently destroyed the power of the Tang dynasty. Yuzhou not only caused devastation in the north, he also marched on southern China, something the earlier An Lushan Rebellion had failed to do. While in southern China, Yuzhou's army committed the Guangzhou massacre, in which merchants of several ethnicities and religious groups were attacked in 878 to 879. Medieval Chinese sources claim Yuzhou was responsible for killing up to 8 million people during his rebellion, a revolt that the Tang never recovered from. The Tang found itself weakened against outside powers, with large groups of bandits roaming the countryside, bringing anarchy and unrest to several cities, as a large percentage of aristocracy and landed wealth was destroyed. The final 2 decades of the Tang dynasty saw the gradual collapse of central authority and the rise of 2 prominent military rivals in northern China, named Li Keyong and Zhu Wen. Tang forces had defeated Yuzhou with the aid of a Turkic people known as Shator, who came from what is now Shanxi and led by Li Keyong. Li Keyong was made a jiadushu and later the Prince of Jin, and given the imperial title of Li by the Tang court. Zhu Wen had been a sword smuggler before serving under Yuzhou. On surrendering to Tang forces, he helped to defeat Huang and was renamed Xuanzong, or Zhu of perfect loyalty, and given rapid military promotions up to governor of Xuanwu circuit. From his power base in Kaifeng, Zhu Wen launched attacks on the Tang capital of Chang'an in 901, capturing the city and the imperial family. By 903, he had forced Emperor Taizong to move the capital to Luoyang in preparation for taking the throne himself. The following year, Zhu Wen assassinated the emperor and replaced him with the emperor's young son, Emperor Ai. In 905, the brothers of Emperor Ai, several court officials, and Empress Dowager He were all executed under the orders of Zhu Wen. With the Tang dynasty ending, when Zhu Wen deposed Emperor Ai and took the throne for himself, to be known posthumously as Emperor Taizong of later Liang. When Zhu Wen established the later Liang, this inaugurated the period known as the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period. A year after seizing power, Zhu had the deposed emperor poisoned. Zhu Wen's hated adversary, Li Keyong, died in 908, but out of loyalty to Tang, he never claimed the title of emperor. His son, Li Kunshu, inherited his father's title, Prince of Jin, together with a hatred for Zhu. In 923, Li Kunshu declared a restored Tang Dynasty, the later Tang, to become Emperor Xuanzong, and defeated the later Liang the same year. Southern China would remain splintered into several small kingdoms until the arrival of the Song Dynasty in 960. That is all for this video. If you've enjoyed watching and it has shown you a little detail of life here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link. Till the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.